What do you think? Do you think he's a fascist?
Well, I'm looking at the definition of fascism. It's a far-right, authoritarian, ultra-nationalist political ideology and movement characterized by a dictatorial leader, centralized autocracy, militarism, forcible suppression of opposition, belief in a natural social hierarchy. So certainly, in my experience, those are the kind of things that he thinks would work better in terms of running America.
John Kelly is a retired general who served as chief of staff for the former president. Before that, he was Secretary of Homeland Security in the Trump administration as well. And similarly to Donald Trump's running mate, Kelly just told the New York Times in about 12 different ways that Trump is a fascist.
And again, our Constitution, our founders built in to the Constitution and to the way our government operates, built in a lot of checks and balances, and didn't design the government to be streamlined and whatnot. So, but certainly the former president is in the far right area. He's certainly an authoritarian, admires people who are dictators. He has said that. So he certainly falls into the general definition of fascist, for sure.
Apparently, Donald Trump's latest promise to use the military against political opponents he deemed the enemy of the people prompted Kelly to agree to 3 on-the-record recorded discussions with a reporter for the New York Times. And he had a lot to say.
If he was left to his own devices, would he be a dictator if he didn't have people around him?
Oh, I think I think he'd love to be. I think he'd love to be just like he was in business. He could tell people to do things and they would do it, and not really bother too much about whether what the legalities were and whatnot. But again, I didn't know him before, so I can't really.
And did the former president appreciate the Constitution? Did he appreciate any of these things?
No. It was fascinating. I mean, he doesn't know a lot about American history, and certainly as a I guess a farmer executive in his civilian world, I guess you can be a dictator because you can fire people pretty easily, and the only thing theoretically that you have to follow is the law. But then again, an awful lot of people break the law and expect subordinates to break the law or to circumvent the law somehow. And that's where he was coming from. That was his worldview.
Did he expected the people that worked for him to break the law?
Well, when he would give, and I think I've told you this many times, when he would tell me that he wanted to do something, 100% of the time I check with the White House counsel, because oftentimes he wouldn't have the authority to do what he wanted to do.
As we go through these revelations, what you'll notice is that everything General Kelly is saying has already been shown to us by Trump himself. As in his business ventures, Trump told people like his former fixer, Michael Cohen, to do illegal activities and expected them to do it. Cohen even spent time in prison for his loyalty to him before deciding to live his own life. So here's more.
And I think this issue of using the military to go after American citizens is one of those things I think is a very, very bad thing. Even to say it for political purposes to get elected, I think it's a very, very bad thing, let alone actually doing it. Until the former president started talking about this, and this goes back to when I was in the White House, for that matter, DHS, I was, originally the conversation would be, Mr. President, that's outside your authority, or, that's a routine use. You really don't want to do that inside the United States. But now that he's talking about it as I'm going to do it is again, it's disturbing.
Again, he's vowing to use the military against his perceived enemies. So Kelly's words should be seen as confirmation of what Trump is already promising. We've already forgotten that his defense secretary, Mark Esper, warned us that Trump wanted to deploy the military on protesters that were making him look bad before he held the Bible out on the street.
The option to use active duty forces in a law enforcement role should only be used as a matter of last resort and only in the most urgent and dire of situations. We are not in one of those situations now. I do not support invoking the Insurrection Act.
He says, can't you just shoot them? Just shoot them in the legs or something. And he's suggesting that that's what we should do, that we should bring in the troops and shoot the protesters.
This is information we already had from reputable sources like Mark Esper, who were in Trump's good graces until they refused to do anything that he wanted, which caused them to suddenly be characterized by Trump as disgruntled, stupid, and part of the deep state. It's why he wants to clear the government of anyone that isn't a yes man.
He commented more than once that, that Hitler did some good things too. And of course, if you know history, again, I think he's lacking in that. But if you know what Hitler was all about, it'd be pretty hard to make an argument that he did anything good.
So what would you say when he said to you that Hitler did a lot of good things?
Well, I tell him that. I said, first of all, you should never say that. But if you knew what Hitler was all about from the beginning to the end, everything he did was in support of his racist, fascist life, philosophy, so that nothing he did you could argue was good. It was certainly not done for the right reason.
Jeffrey Goldberg at The Atlantic reported that former generals who have worked for Trump say that the sole military virtue he prizes is obedience. As his presidency drew to a close, and in the years since, he has become more and more interested in the advantages of dictatorship and the absolute control over the military that he believes it would deliver. I need the kind of generals that Hitler had, Trump said in a private conversation in the White House, according to two people who heard him say this. People who were totally loyal to him, that follow orders. And as the theme goes, this tracks with what Trump has said out loud about modern-day authoritarians.
Hey, he's the head of a country, and I mean, he's the strong head. Don't let anyone think anything different. Right. He speaks and his people sit up at attention. I want my people to do the same.
You were his Pentagon chief. The former defense secretary is saying that it is a legitimate fear that the former commander-in-chief, who is seeking to be the commander-in-chief again, would want to seek retribution against someone like General Milley simply because he doesn't like the way that tenure is being reported in books and in articles.
Yeah, and I think simply also because the way Milley conducted himself, which was to offer candid, frank advice. If it wasn't what the president wanted to hear because of what Milley was saying, or he didn't want to hear what I was saying, look, he doesn't like that. He wants to find yes men in his office. And so, yeah, he would do that. It's hard for me to believe I'm saying that as well. I wish I didn't have to say that. But if I didn't have the experience in the Oval Office with President Trump seriously wanting to call back to active duty McChrystal and McRaven to court-martial them, I would be less certain. But unfortunately, it is what it is.
If this evidence isn't overwhelming by now, or simply makes every person rethink their conclusions about the former president, it's because they just don't want to accept it. John Kelly said he agrees with some policies that Trump pushed for. So these guys aren't just a bunch of Democrats looking to tank Donald Trump's chances in this election. They've seen his character up close and realized that he's not a Republican either.
You can take what John says to the bank. I'm absolutely convinced. I didn't hear many, probably most of these statements myself, but if John says that Donald Trump said them, I believe it implicitly. Trump said after leaving office, said it publicly, he would suspend the Constitution or terminate it because of the unfairness, the effort to steal the 2020 election. That statement alone, if he said nothing else, if he had never mentioned the words Adolf Hitler, that alone is disqualifying in my point of view. I believe the story that appeared in the Atlantic, it sounds like Trump. I didn't hear him say those precise words. He is perfectly capable of it. He cares only about himself.
Does anyone really think John Bolton is a liberal operative of the Democratic Party? I'm sure he's still got a laundry list of conservative positions and policies that most Democrats would disagree with. So when all of these former officials and staffers, from Mike Pence to John Kelly, to Mark Esper, to John Bolton, James Mattis, Bill Barr, Mark Milley, Rex Tillerson, Stephanie Grisham, and Cassidy Hutchinson, only to name a few, when they relay these stories that match up to paint the same picture, the only reason to dismiss this many people is to be in favor of Trump's public promise of fascism.
Anderson, I know John Kelly very well. General John Kelly was the commander of Southcom, which is based out of South Florida. We were neighbors in Coral Gables. He, his wife, Karen, I spent a lot of time socializing with them. I spent a lot of time with them just after they had lost their son, Robert, who died in Afghanistan, serving in Afghanistan. To me, hearing John talk about this right now is chilling, because it's an extraordinary step for John Kelly to take 14 days before the election, trying to warn the American people. Look, the gravitas that John Kelly has, the commitment to duty, the dedication to chain of command, this is not something he does lightly. John Kelly has not written a book. He hasn't been out there giving paid speeches, blasting Trump. He hasn't been on TV or trying to become a TV commentator. John Kelly has kept fairly quiet. This is a desperate measure trying to warn the American people not to re-elect this man, because John Kelly knows him up close. I have zero doubt that John Kelly is telling the truth. John Kelly does not lie. He served admirably and honorably for decades and decades. This is a man who we should listen to. And look, if you are a staunch Trump supporter, it won't matter to you. But to those Republicans who say they have the greatest respect for the military, to those Republicans who say they are for law and order, they better heed John Kelly's words.